sorry, I should have verified this with you a couple of days ago.
I'm always terrified of speaking in public, so it's okay. I know people ask me to do a tribute all the time at Rota, because I volunteer there in 2020, but yeah, as far as, I'm sorry, that's okay.
I don't think we actually have everybody back yet.
Yes. I was just going to say something. Oh, if anybody wants to buy tickets for the lottery, this is the last chance they have, because we'll draw after this is over.
Yep.
So I think, or for the raffle. I think that's about it.
Okay.
Connection. Can we keep phone to the mission and see if they are coming back to collect their plates and that, or
I can, yeah.
you're saying?
Not right this minute.
No,
Yeah.
no.
No, we're good. Welcome back from lunch, ladies. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And I think we're ready to get started. Before we get started with our special guest, just a couple of housekeeping things to bring to your attention. This lovely little book, Grandmother's Necklace, which has a selection of stories and poems by writers and other people, is here for sale. It's beside the raffle table, $5. It has lovely little things in it to read. I think I'm going to get a copy and share it with my grandchildren. Anyway, please, $5 goes to the Stephen Lewis Foundation, and it's a lovely little collection of stories and poems. Speaking of the raffle table, once we've heard from our next guest, we'll take a quick pause before going on to Peggy's, which is the final presentation of the day, and it'll be your last chance to buy a raffle ticket, because as soon as we're finished, the tickets will be drawn. No? We're closed? Okay, well, you've lost your chance then. Sorry about that. Okay, well, if you really, really, really want a raffle ticket, maybe we can make an exception. Anyway, our next speaker, I'm delighted to have here with us. This was something that was brought to my attention a few weeks ago, and we said, yes, 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 we'd love to hear him speak, because I understand he's a wonderful speaker and he's spoken to a great many very distinguished audiences, so it's lovely that he's agreed to be with us here today. And to introduce him, Lena Halle is going to do the official introduction. Thank you, Lena.
Hi, I'm not used to speaking with a megaphone, but anyway, I just thought I would like to introduce Kenneth. I think I can call him my friend. I'm continuously in awe with finding out what Rotem has done and is doing, and he will tell you a lot more. But one thing I would like to mention is Kenneth has just been recognized by the United Nations Decade on Healthy Aging as one of the 50 leaders making the world a better place to grow. So, without any of it.
Thank you so much for having me. And good afternoon. When you mentioned that I've spoken and I'm a good speaker, you scare me because I am not, but I've been given a chance to share my stories a number of times. I think I have actually before spoken the grandmothers groups here. My friend Sue Kuzno brought me, and so I have, but I'm not a good speaker. But I'm able to share my personal stories, and I've also had the opportunity to address the UN several times, including the UN AIDS Board, to talk about HIV, AIDS, and grandmothers. But I'm blessed to be here, and thank you, Lina and Sue, for bringing me here. Today I'm here with my wife, Miriam. She's back there. We came with our colleague, Justine. Justine is responsible for our communications and partner relationships. As I think the slide shows on top, my names are Kenneth Mugaya Hwenchi. I was privileged to start Reach One Touch One Ministries, which is a mission organization helping older people and predominantly grandmothers. Most likely the first and most effective it's gone off. So I'm privileged to be here, and what I will share with you today predominantly is just a testimony of my life, which I call the beautiful journey with grandmothers. In 2001, I had the privilege to come and study at the Code Institute in Nova Scotia. And while I was there, I got a job in America, and I went to work in America with a plan to bring my family over and live in the land of opportunities. While I was in America, before I could bring my family to America, my wife found 2 children who needed help, and these children were living with a grandmother, Elizabeth. And she asked me if we could help them. We helped these 2 girls, and to cut the long story short, we quickly discovered that their grandmother, who herself had lost all her family and was left with Elizabeth and Margaret, her grandchildren, was most needed than the grandchildren themselves. So I left America and went back to my country and started visiting Elizabeth. And now, almost 20 years ago, from then to now, we are supporting over 1,000 older people, and 70% of them are women in Uganda and Ethiopia. So I'll share that story, and as a way of thanking you, because I know since I've been here before, and now you have supported our work and the work of other organizations like us tremendously. So basically, what I will share today is to give the opportunity to share in the joy that me and my colleagues experience daily. If we can move to the next slide. So Justine took that picture. She is one of the grannies that we support. And the beauty of doing this job is to see the joy that these grandmothers experience. And we experience this when we come to them. We had gone to the Rotom School where the grandmothers also meet, and they just want to take photographs with me. And that was one of the photographs we took, and I just like that photograph because it just expresses how happy they are and how also happy we are. We can move to the next slide, please. So as I said, Rotom is a Christian organization. Our vision is to see older persons, and in this case, grandmothers, live a dignified and fulfilled life. And it's not so that they are not living dignified lives, let me put it right. And I'll quickly tell you why. So let's move the next slide, please. So, and this is how we try to do it. As I said, we are a Christian, faith-based organization, and we support the older person to spiritually, but also emotionally. Many older persons, as I will share, are lonely, they are worried, they are struggling, they are scared of the future. And being able to support them emotionally and spiritually helps them to have hope and to be at peace. The other way we try to support them is to access health care. We do not have health insurance in Uganda. We do not have free access to health care in Uganda. Health care is paid for, and for all the grannies that we support, Rotom pays for the health care, as well as providing other ways. And then the third way is to ensure that they have enough food to eat and for their households. The need for food is now even serious since COVID and the war in Ukraine. Just like you, we depend on fertilizer from Ukraine, we depend on wheat from Ukraine, and most of the oil we use is not from Uganda. So the cost of food, as I speak to you now, has quadrupled in Uganda. So we try to support older persons to have enough food, and we also help them to raise grandchildren in their care. So let's go to the next slide. So, and this is what we do to meet the objectives I've set out. So we have the Grandmother Support Project. The Grandmother Support Project, which is fully paid by the Stephen Lewis Foundation since 2007, supports grandmothers to access health care, to access food, to support each other, as well as their grandchildren to achieve education. And it has transformed many, many lives through the stories I will share. The other program we run is the Rotom Health Centers. Years before, Stu would remember this, we had problems accessing health care for older people. Because we are a fast-growing population, predominantly childbearing population, with over 58% children, our health care policy is geared toward child and maternal health. And there's a lot of malaria and other diseases. So basically the healthcare workers, the health facilities, the drugs available are geared towards that population who are the majority. So we had incidences in the past where you would go to the health center and spend a day without seeing a doctor, return not see a doctor. In one incident, we took an older man called Samuel to the health center, which was actually church-run. And they had one ward for men, and Samuel at that point was incontinent. He had malaria, but he also had incontinence as part of the conditions he had. After 2 days, the health center asked us to take him away because they were not able to care for him. And they claimed the ward was smelly, therefore they couldn't keep other patients. Instead of losing the other patients, we would take our senior away. We chose to rent a room not too far from the hospital so they could come and administer the medication through IV. They forgot or they became too busy. So the person who was next to him called us after 2 days to come, and he was very weak and sick. We tried to drive him to the National Hospital in Kampala, and on our way there, he passed away. I was so angry that time. In my simple understanding, I knew the only reason Samuel Tom Sange passed away is because he was older. And because he was older, he was not able to manage his toilet and other things the way he would have done when he was younger. Nobody could care for him. Therefore, they sent him away, and in the process, he passed away. So that anger led me to traverse the USA and Canada raising money. And luckily, we have been able to build 2 health facilities. One, again, was partly paid for by the Stephen Lewis Foundation, whose sole purpose is to care for older people. And at the Rotom Health Centers, if we had sent anybody away, we have never sent anybody away, but if we were to, we would selectively send away the younger people. But we have never had to do anything like that. So we have the health centers, which have now become the centers of excellence in geriatric care in East Africa. They're the only kinds where the nurses, the doctors, the structure of the buildings has been designed and is run to take care of people who have advanced age. So the other that we run is the Rotom School. The Rotom School is a school that provides daycare and education for grandchildren that have been left care in the older persons. On average, every Rotom-supported granny cares for 3 orphans. So we support about 1,000 now. So we have, in the care of these grannies, 3,000 orphans. At the moment, we are able to support 400, and a bunch of them at the Rotom School. Again, 100 of them are supported by the Stephen Lewis Foundation through the Grandmother Support Project. So these young children, who we started with as young children, have been growing, and to prepare them for work life, we started what we call the Champions Project. The Champions Project is focused on not only giving university and college education to granddaughters of the seniors we support, but also giving them mentorship. So we find younger women in employment sector who mentor these students, and we also do training programs in leadership, as well as we have a mentoring program, as well as graduation preparation. Graduation preparation involves teaching them how to apply for jobs, how to manage their finances, and because of this, over 100 young girls, young ladies have been educated with degrees, and all of them are gainfully employed. None of our graduates is unemployed, and therefore they have started helping their grandmothers, as I will share here shortly. And the last one is the Journey for Change. The Journey for Change, I will ask later, Lina's talk about, is an experience through which you can come and be part of our work for a short time or for a long time, and be part of what we do. We call it Journey for Change because that experience that you have with us will change you as well as change the people you have come to be part of. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we have supported over the last 19 years, and we'll be celebrating 20 years at the same time as the foundation. We have supported over this period over 2,000 grannies and 600 grandchildren. And in the last few years alone, you can see the trend. There was a decline in 2020, of course, because of COVID, but we have seen now it is stabilizing and we continue to grow. But for us who started supporting one grandmother, Elizabeth, have been able to support 2,000. And when we say support, it means all the support. If you fall sick, we take you to hospital. We visit you at home, and it's a wraparound service. It's a holistic service that we provide. So that's what we've been able to do in the last 5 years. So we can continue the next slide, and I'll spend a little time on that. Next slide, please. So this is not new to you. You all know this, but I'll just mention it anyway. Why are we doing this? we know it is because of HIV and AIDS that took the middle age, the most active at the time they would have helped our country. We also know that there's rural-urban migration, leaving so many older people, grandmothers, in their villages. But we also know that there's increasing and biting poverty. While the world is growing, and even Africa is growing, this growth is skewed to the so-called investors who are making too much money, and then the poor are getting poorer. And by the time we started, 64% of anybody above 60 was in extreme poverty, living below $1 a day at that point. For those under Rotom now, they have since improved their incomes and they live better, but the majority still live like that. That's why we do that. We also do that because many elderly are left with grandchildren to look after, which again you have learned of through the stories we share and newsletters. But one of the things that is important to share, it may not be there, is that in African countries and in Uganda, the population is carried by less than 20%. The 80% depend on 20%. What do I mean? If we have 56% children and we have 6% seniors, naturally all those are not gainfully working in the normal ways. They are still either young or students, or they are too old or weak to work. So you already, by just the structure of the population, have 60% that are not earning. And then, because of unemployment, you have another good 10% who can't work. And then with disease and sicknesses, you easily find yourself having close to 80% of the population at any one point are not earning any income. The 20 who are earning income have to carry their relatives who are part of the 80%, and their tax payments are so minimal to carry an economy. People ask me, but for how many years Uganda has not been in war? Why doesn't your government do a good job? Yes, our government ought to do a better job. Most governments, including Canada government, can do a better job. Our government ought to do a better job. But even if you're the most genius leader, how much tax can you get from 20% to sustain 80%? So for a long time, until there's population control, and until these many young people get an education, we will still need help. That's not normally talked about, but when I was trying to analyze why we are in this cycle, it didn't take much. It doesn't take rocket science to understand that there's so few people who can work to support the rest of us. So that's why we do it. And at the time when we started, the grandmothers, your sisters, your friends, were part of carrying the burden. They were left with orphans to look after instead of being looked after, and it was painful. Elizabeth, who I met, actually, when we supported her, we paid school fees for her grandchildren, Miriam and I and our friends in America. We built for her a house, a brand new house. But I can't tell you that during that process she could even say thank you. She did not even have, she had suffered so much after losing her family. The ability to appreciate good had diminished. It was a time of pain. And she asked me questions like, why are you helping me? I said, I'm a Christian. She said, you're not the only Christian. A Reverend Father comes by my house, he even never stops. I said, oh, I have some money, I live in America. Many people are so rich, Kenneth, they buy property near me, they're building new houses, nobody helps me. I said, you know what? I don't have an answer, let me go back to America and work. But those questions, I think, are part of what prompted me to think about her. And when my wife allowed me to come back to Uganda and came back to her, And as I said, from her, it's now thousands of grannies we've supported. So what I'm going to share next, let's go to the next slide. What I'm going to share next is that what I call the beautiful journey. From that time of pain that we have described to you in many ways before, to the time now where I think we have made some progress. With the support of the Stephen Lewis Foundation, the Stephen Lewis Foundation was the first ever quote-unquote donor or foundation to support us. Before that, for the first 3 years, we had been receiving support from personal friends, and they gave us the first $30,000. It was like heaven and earth. But with their support, which I'm sure you are the ones who collected, because it was only 1 year after the grandmothers campaign started that we started receiving the support. Because of their support and support of many other friends, we have many, many friends now from Canada, from USA, and from Uganda, actually. 10% of our funds come from Uganda that support us. Because of that support, we started then visiting grannies at home. And the visit would look like this. I would just come into your house, sit down, have a lovely conversation, answer your questions, and if you allowed, just pray together. And then there was the same story. Whoever we visited, the first time I think it was Elizabeth, then they became 8, then they became 16. Whoever I visited was telling me the same story. I lost my family. I have grandchildren to look after. Some of my grandchildren called me a witch. It was just painful. So I asked them if we could come together and just talk about what they're telling me. I cannot do anything about it. Let's come together. So we started what we call weekly fellowships, social support groups. Started coming together and listening to each other and singing a song, or reading the Bible, and they loved it. They loved it that at some point they would not want to go home. So my friend thought, these judges, as we call them, these old women are not going home, they are getting hungry. So he offered to pay a meal for them. There were only 8. So he could pay $1 for each of them, and I would give them a lunch. Since then, up to now, except during COVID time, 1,000 grannies in 58 villages now come together weekly for at least 2 hours, mostly 3 or 4, as long as they want, and they just talk. And Sue Kuzuno, who came to us in 2008, saw that celebration. It's just like a party time. And they talk about their problems. Now we've improved it. They can even learn about health. They can learn about diabetes. They can learn about nutrition. And that is the most important part you have contributed, enabling the grandmothers to come together weekly and just be grandmothers and talk about their challenges. So we do that, and we also provide complete free health care. And this is a big package, but I'll quickly summarize what it looks like. Every granny who comes into Rotom will receive screening. So we check their blood pressure, blood sugar, and the basics, malaria and all that. So we know from the beginning their state of health. Remember, our selection criteria looks for the most needed, so majority of them will be actually in poor health. But because we know their health, then now we have a plan to manage their health care. So then we pay for medications, we pay for food, and they start getting better and better. We can go to the next slide, please. So we do that, and we also support grandchildren to go to school. So when we started, we were giving food at the fellowship. And then grannies would keep the food and take it home. And then, of course, we quickly learned. They would even share the medicines. We quickly learned that every grandparent's number one desire is their grandchildren to be happy. So they were sharing their food, they were sharing their medicines. And again, it's not blowing the trumpet, it's just saying the truth. The first grandchildren to be supported, 100 of them, was paid for by the Stephen Lewis Foundation. So, Zipporah is one of those grandchildren. The grandmother died last year, unfortunately, who were supported by the Stephen Lewis Foundation. And later, when the Stephen Lewis Foundation's funds were not sufficient, there is another charity in Toronto called Beautiful World Canada. They supported her college education, and now she has a degree in tourism. She's the first girl in her community to ever go to college. She shared with us one time about her life before. She said she had never had her own clothes except hand-downs from her grandmother. Now imagine, not even from her big sister, from her grandmother. I mean, think about design, think about size, think anything was so off, but that's all she had. And she slept with her grandmother. And when Rotom came into her life, we provided not only soap, not only Vaseline, not only sanitary pads, not only school fees, we provided Nora, the social worker, to just be there for her. In the beginning years, we had issues of abuse in that village, which you've been to, both of you have been to, Lina and Sue. And we had a social worker called Erican. Erican fought the village men that were at rampage, arrested so many of them, took them to court, took them to police, and within 2 years, every child would lie that I belonged to Rotom. Because if you belonged to Rotom, nobody would touch you. And we worked with the police, local council leaders. The culture has completely changed. I cannot say that child abuse has been eliminated, but it's minimally so low that we don't even hear about it. And she is one of those who survived that. She now has her degree. I think she graduated last year. She's having a temporary job, but I'm very sure soon she will have a job. How I wish her grandmother had lived long enough to benefit from her care, because we have many others who have graduated. Last year alone, we graduated 46, and a bunch of them are looking after their grandparents and siblings. But this is the beautiful journey I'm talking about. From the pain of seeing your grandchildren having no food, losing your children to AIDS, lacking health care, to having a granddaughter graduate, the first one in that village. And I really want you, and I think we are talking with Nyambi about how important your support is. It's a lot of money that you give us. I think at Rotom, the Stephen Lewis Foundation support makes 20% of our funds. But even if it was only Zipporah that you saved the suffering, in my opinion, it would still be sufficient. Being many is wonderful, but if you think about your granddaughter and think about Zipporah being your granddaughter, and then you think about grandmothers in Canada who made it possible that your granddaughter would become the first woman to get a degree in that village, I think you ought to clap for yourselves for the impact you have in Africa. And these young women will not be grandmothers that suffer like their grandparents suffered. No, they will not. Anyway, I can just go on and on. It's just... But then we created HIV and AIDS awareness. So the biggest problem around AIDS was stigma, especially among the older people. No grandmother in Africa wanted to be identified as having been impacted by AIDS. Actually, one time the Stephen Lewis Foundation came to make pictures and stories, and we invited two grannies, Evelyn, who was very popular, and then another granny, and they were being interviewed by Alexis. And when they asked her if her grandchildren had died of AIDS, she was so angry, she walked away, she just said, "No, who said they died of AIDS?" Because there was so much stigma around AIDS. So, but through the weekly support meetings, we talked about AIDS, We trained the grandmothers. They accepted it. They learned to talk about it. Actually, I remember Evelyn, when she came from Swaziland, she took all her grandchildren to test for HIV and AIDS, and some had it, but they started taking medication. So we talked about it, taught them about it. They knew that you could protect yourself, and if there was already AIDS, they knew what to do. And that was so empowering. And to the next slide, please. That was so empowering that, and we started helping them with food, of course, but also with planting material to raise food. And I remember the first time we got money from, the second or third time, I don't remember what time, we gave the grannies in the Kahama Hills each 8 kilograms of potato seed. Those grannies surprised me. They harvested tenfold, 100 kilograms, 200 kilograms. They had so much food. Then we gave each one of them a goat, and gave the billy goats or the he-goats to the lay readers of the Catholic Church in the community so they could take their female goat for breeding to that place. And in 3 years, they had 8 goats, 10 goats, 11 goats. And when we visited one granny, she had 5. So I asked her about the goats. She said, "I'm so sorry, sir, but you know we could have had 8 by now, but we only have 5. I said, "Oh, sorry, what happened?" She said, "Last Christmas, I really wanted to buy clothes for my children, and I sold some, and we had Christmas." I said, "That's why I gave you the goats. That's why I gave you the goats." But that transformation is just beyond understanding. To see a grandmother who had given up and barely making enough food to feed her grandchildren have a goat to sell and have her own cash and buy clothes for her grandchildren. And when I talked about it in fellowships, then they were free to tell me they are selling goats, and they were also giving the first female goat to other grannies. So we bought 150 goats. In less than how many years? The whole village had goats. Everybody had goats. And everybody had potatoes. Everybody had beans. They had peas, and trucks started coming from Kampala all the way to Kahama village to buy peas, fresh peas to take to the market. And the economy of the village was just transformed. And Rotom became the darling of the local leaders. I was telling Sue, nobody stole from us anymore. Nobody wanted to do any harm to us anymore. The grandmothers became the darling of the village because they had brought economy to their village. So we did that, and we taught them how to save money. They didn't borrow money themselves a lot. They lent it to their daughters-in-law, and they still have a savings scheme in which they can save their money. And what some of the groups do, they don't even lend it to anybody. They just keep collecting, and at Christmas time, they share. Now they have so much put together at once to go and buy meat for Christmas. They don't buy cake. They buy soda. They buy meat. They buy nice clothing for themselves and for their grandchildren. And I know you don't take soda here because you're trying to live healthy, but for them, there's no problem. They never have soda anyway in between. So the only soda of Christmas or the Rotom Fellowship cannot cause them blood sugar if they don't have it. So that's part of the journey, the beautiful journey I'm trying to share with you, that you are part of, just physically far away. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we also have done home improvement. We have actually, in 2009, the foundation gave us $200,000 to build 25 houses for grannies and 30 latrines. This $200,000 was just like the 5 fish and 2 loaves, or 2 loaves and 5 fish, whatever it is. So they gave us the money to build those houses in 1 year, and we had an incredible young man called Deo, who is still with us, saved the money, stretched the dollar, and we built 30 houses, 55 latrines. The latrines almost doubled, and we had $20,000 left over. And the Stephen Lewis Foundation came back to us and said, you have used the money so well, we'll give you another $20,000, you build a clinic for the grannies. And we started the clinic. So we have since built these rainwater harvest systems. The objective is that each granny would have 60 liters of water within 200 meters from their house. Uganda, being in the tropics, gets a lot of rainfall. And you can harvest rainwater in that container, and the grannies can use it. But we have also established many public not rainwater, wells where the grannies can fetch water. But even if they are not able to go and carry the jerrycan, they can get the water from there. So we'll run here quick. And every old woman that we support has a new mattress. Whenever they come in, they get a new mattress. Let's go to the next slide, please. So with these efforts, taking care of health, taking care of the grandchildren, and taking care of the basics, the grandmothers now gain courage. They become strong. They start talking. They start wanting to be part of the process, and they demand to be part of what's happening around them. They have the confidence. And then we start working to mobilize them. And I know one of the things we did was to connect the grandmothers in Uganda with the grandmothers in Kenya and South Africa, and they were writing to each other over a period of a year. And that was also part of healing and sharing stories. And I know that process, we were able to write a book, which we launched in Uganda and shared with the grandmothers. But the demand for them to have more presence increased, and as we'll see in the next slide, if you can, real quick. So they started participating in local elections. At the same time, we had been lobbying the government of Uganda, and the government of Uganda had given in to our demand for having representation of all the people on all levels of governance, including now parliament. Grandmothers contested for elections and won. During the grandmothers' gathering in Uganda, some grandmothers left us in the gathering to go back to their villages because they were contesting. They wanted to win, and they won. And they started being part of the elections. Because of the demand, I convinced Ilana, and she gave me $300,000 to organize the first ever grandmothers gathering in Uganda, and brought together 500 grandmothers from the whole country into a 4-star hotel. The situation was electric. We invited the Prime Minister, the ministers, the heads of section of health, and the women demanded their rights from there and made the Entebbe statement. And from that, we birthed the Grandmothers Consortium, which is the organization of 6 grandmothers organizations supported by the Stephen Lewis Foundation. I'm privileged to be the chair from then on. And that platform of the consortium has 10 groups at district level who will go to the district council meeting during the budget time and speak in their own ways, asking why are they not in the budget. We have 10 others. The other ones are 10 groups. That means 100 are always on the move. The foundation gives us money to do that, to take them, transport, and all that. Then the other 10 who have some education go to the national level. They went even to the president, and they are demanding. That's why I was telling we need to continue supporting that level of now advocacy. And again, now that's Lois also. And now the grandchildren have graduated. They have jobs. They work. I think 8 of them work for Rotom now. And they are running these programs. And to me, that is sustainability. Even when some of us grow old and pass on, these granddaughters are in there. The granddaughters who are working give their grandmothers and siblings so much more money, almost half of their money, than we can ever donate to their grandmothers. They are now helping their own families. And the first grandchildren who graduated, I know one of them called Linda, she recently bought a water harvest system for a granny. So they are now not only helping themselves, they are donating to Rotom, and they are teaching others how to help. So let's do the next slide here as I conclude. Is it Justine, maybe? So anyway, if we could go to the next slide. So this is the journey I'm talking about. It's a journey that I call beautiful because we saw it. We saw it from the time of pain. And now when we thought we had made much progress, COVID came. The country was shut down. We had 3 waves officially, but it continues, so it's on and on. In the second wave, I came face to face with COVID. I lost my brother to COVID. So it impacted our country. Fellowships that were a source of joy were stopped. Church was stopped. School was stopped. Prices went up. Everybody was panicking. And we got scared because they said the age group we support was going to be impacted most. So we can go to the next slide. But again, Rotom rose up to the challenge. For the highest time of COVID, which was, and Lena was there just before COVID, she had to run back to Canada because we had gone to the national park and we met Chinese there, and we feared maybe they had brought COVID, but anyway, she didn't get any of it. But Rotom rose up to the occasion. The height of COVID in Uganda was April to July 2020, I think it was. Everybody was struggling. The government tried to give food. They failed to give enough food. Rotom single-handedly gave for 3 months non-stop enough food to all households of the grannies we supported. And them and their grandchildren had enough to eat. And then we were able to creatively, thanks to my wife, she leads the school, find a way of using bicycles to send schoolwork to children at home, and Rotom school children kept going to school up to today. And then we were also able to vaccinate all the grannies that we supported. I think a few just refused, but we had access, and then the government recognized us and made us official center for vaccination. And yeah, that's a volunteer, that one's a volunteer. So this far we have come. The grannies are a bit happy. The grandchildren are going to school, thanks to all of you. And just do the next thing and see how if to be able to play. Can that thing play? Maybe not. That's a small video. And this video went viral on TikTok. Now, this is a Rotom-supported granny. I caught it on social media. You can't hear what she's saying, but she's actually asking another granny to come and they play. And this is Ebenezer. This is the far we have come. This is actually meant for the children at the Rotom school, but because we have grannies living there, they went on the slide, on the swing, whatever, and they started swinging. And when I caught it, and I saw it was our granny, I just downloaded it, and I said, what a joy that they can not only have a place to play, but they can also desire to play. And this is what you have contributed to, and this is what we want to see. The dollars mean a lot, but this means so much more. This is just awesome. And this I never knew would happen when we started Rotom, but now we see that. So the next slide. So how the future looks like, we have to continue advocating because Rotom, with all the effort we have done, in 19 years, we've only supported 2,000. There's another 1 million that needs support. So we have to advocate that the government, whose sole responsibility is to care for its people, will take care of it. That the government will provide pension, the government will provide child support, the government will provide free health care, just at the minimum. We also have to continue helping the children to get education, to cut the cycle, but also to provide sustainability of care. And as I mentioned earlier when I was supporting Nyambi, actually, even that granny who's in the swing, a few months ago, she was bedridden. So we brought her to Rotom Care Center so that she can be cared for, and she got better, now she can swing. But there are many who are getting older who need long-term care, which is a big challenge. As I like to say, we have become victims of our success. The average age of grandmothers we support in the last 7 years has grown from 72 to 78, meaning many are in 80s and 90s. So that's what we need to do. And so this is the model of the long-term care center we have built. We have 2 already. We are building the 3rd. It's being funded by Canadian friends. One of the grannies, actually, has paid for buying land to build that, so that those who become very old and have no family can be cared for in their last days of life. Yeah, that's what it will have. And now I think I would just like to ask Lena, if she doesn't mind. I know I've probably already overstayed my time, but I cannot express the Journey for Change experience than a person who has been to Uganda. Sue has been to Uganda as well, but Lena has been to Uganda most recent. So if you don't mind, just a minute and share with us.
Peggy, I won't take your time. I'll be brief. So through Sue, I met Kenneth and I had been to South Africa to one of the SLF program, but we had mainly been observers, and I think I wanted to do more. So when Kenneth was in Canada, I said, I would be interested, and could you use a physiotherapist for a bit? Oh, yes, I could. So then at home, I started talking to my husband, and he says, well, I don't want to go there and sit while you're doing all the work during the day. What am I going to do? So again, talked to Kenneth, and my husband is actually a teacher, chemistry teacher. Well, he couldn't teach for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So I said to Kenneth, what could you do? Oh, if he's a man of all trades, we can do something for sure. So Bob came, and the one school was just being built. Actually, the cement floor was not even dry when we got there. And he was asked, under supervision, to wire the school so that they could do the education, because there, it is the equator, or just about, so 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the afternoon is fine, but after that, you need electricity, you want to use an iPad, you need electricity. So that's what Bob did. So it kind of stayed in the education side, because he was doing this for the school. I was used as a physiotherapist. There was already somebody there offering services, so we exchanged a lot, and I kind of got together with Thomas. I had brought some colorful anatomy books from Canada, which I left there for him to use afterwards. So I was more on the health side, but as Kenneth says, we also did communication, because we went to Kahama, to a village at the top of the hill, and we were invited to a fellowship, and we were asked to present ourselves. So then there was some questions, and then they started asking, well, in Canada, how do you deal with sometimes children that don't want to go to school? And another one was, what do you think about family planning? So the lady who had brought us said, oh my gosh, communication is really, and the seeds that they had planted many, many times, even with strangers, got to be possible. So that was quite interesting. Anyway, Kenneth says, well, maybe you could tell your impressions. I was thinking, do I have any bad impression? And no, everything was positive. I'm still in awe with everything they do, all the ingenuity, is that how you say it? That they use to solve all their different problems that they have there. I don't think I gave as much as I received. I think the warmth, the fantastic feeling that I came back with was wonderful. If any of you have the desire, I can tell you we were well lodged and fed, house with electricity, with running water, and yeah, it was all positive. So please do not hesitate if you feel the desire to go and volunteer to talk to Kenneth. He will receive you, and Justine and Miriam will receive you with open arms. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if we have time for questions. If you can move the next slide. But again, please, as much as you're able, support the foundation, support us. Your support is worth everything. For those of you who have faith, pray for us. Often it doesn't seem easy, especially when they start getting very old and dying. But we have since learned how to celebrate dignity in death. And the website is there. You can reach out.
Does anybody have questions for Kenneth?
It's so hard for me to take a short time when I'm talking about.
Questions?
I told them I won't say 20 minutes, but I'm sure it is way beyond. So you can get the information on the internet, but I think for the details of how our health center runs, you may just have to reach out to us. But one of the things we really thank God for is our outreach model. Like I said, we have trained grannies who can read and write how to do basic home-based care. They can check blood pressure, blood sugar, those basics, we're giving them kits and all that. And then we have a nurse whose full-time job is to be on the telephone, on the internet, to check the condition of the seniors from their homes. And if they must be brought into the health center, they can come. Yeah. Yeah, it has saved us money, and we have been able to give 100% access. But again, Justine and I can give you our contacts. if there's not enough information on the internet, we can explain it to you and give you contact to our doctors.
Well, with the Stephen Lewis Foundation. With Stephen Lewis Foundation.
Thank you. I was wondering if you partner with a lot of the other organizations that are doing much the same as you are. You have very wide-ranging programs, and of course there are many organizations that are sort of chasing the same international money, and I wondered how you work together to make sure you all get money.
So until we learned the secret of making every issue an older person's issue, it was difficult because there's no money for older people. Actually, the Stephen Lewis Foundation is one of the very few that were investing money in health in older people. So we started making healthcare an older person's issue. So we now partner with World Health Organization, with the government of Uganda, and others. But the other danger in the NGO world, so whenever I'm confident to say this, we support children, Compassion supports children, World Vision supports children, but when we approached them to support children in the care of grannies, their answer was, that's double support. We cannot give support to the same family twice. So the children in the care of grandmothers could not receive care from these existing organizations because their policy is, that's double support. You find very few organizations like the foundation which work through the grassroots and support them. At the beginning, the requirements were too stringent for us to qualify. We've built our capacity now and we can qualify almost anywhere. We have actually been denied support because we overqualify, but thanks to the foundation which helped us build our capacity, including paying for education of our staff.
Kenneth, thank you very much, Kenneth, for a most inspiring presentation. I think it helped us even to realize how much the Stephen Lewis Foundation is involved in various projects. We'd like to offer you a card and token of OGRAN's appreciation for your time here. This is a donation to Rotem. Sandy, do you want to come up and introduce Peggy?
I have to say a brief thank you first, because Kenneth, that was amazing. What we've been missing in the last couple of years is the stories of the grandmothers and how they're doing. And to hear it from somebody who is there working with them on the ground has just been wonderful. I really, truly enjoyed it. Now we're coming to the end of our program, and we're going to end on a real high note, I know, because Peggy always has interesting things to say. So I will introduce Peggy by saying she's been involved in the grandmothers movement since its very beginnings. She's a co-founder of One World Grannies, the Ottawa-Gatineau Regional Network, and the Grandmothers Advocacy Network. Peggy's also a policy analyst, a well-known writer on aging and grandparenting, and an activist for the rights of older people. She also believes in the value of intergenerational solidarity. I love that. And now she has a total of 18 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So, Peggy, welcome.
Great. Sandy, if you could pull up a chair and I ask Sue and Ruth to come on up. We just won't have to do so much up and downing. Thank you. Okay, yeah, 18 grandchildren. That's what you call intergenerational solidarity. I spent a lot of time in hockey rinks. Anyhow, it's my job to end off the day with looking at the region and some of the history of the region. I think we're a very special region, and we know it, and I think the SLF knows it, and grandmothers across the country know it. So what I'm going to do is just tell you a little story about my reflection of the formation of the region. It's a story, so I may have some details wrong. Then I'm going to ask Ruth and Sue to talk a little bit about the history very quickly of their own group. And then we're going to do something special at the end. Okay? Sound good? All right. So here we go. Mary Jane and I sat uneasily in the car as we prepared to go home. We had just attended the August 2006 Grandmothers Gathering in Toronto, organized by the Stephen Lewis Foundation, just before the beginning of the World AIDS Conference. We were part of 200 Canadian grandmothers and older women from across Canada who'd come together with 100 grandmothers from sub-Saharan Africa. We danced, we laughed, we protested, and we wept together. We heard the stories of the African grandmothers, how in the face of despair, poverty, and stigma, we're dealing with the HIV and AIDS pandemic. We wept at the idea of burying your own children and then turning around to raise your grandchildren and other vulnerable young people whose parents had died of AIDS. We marveled at the courage and resilience shown by our sisters in Africa. Mary Jane said, "Doing nothing is not an option." "Right," I said as I turned the key in the ignition. So we came home, invited friends and colleagues to join us, and started the One World Grannies. There were several others from the Ottawa area at the 2006 Grandmother Gathering. Some of you are here. Who similarly came home to start local groups. Others emerged, organized by women in the area who'd heard about the launch of the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign, or had attended recruitment meetings with Mary Jane and Marjorie. By May 2007, there were 17 independent groups in the region, in the area. The Wakefield Grannies, who were the first group in the region, and were active even before the founding of the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign, were hosting a May Day fair, complete with workshops, food, fundraising activities, and looking at videos and films. Brenda Rooney suggested this might be a good opportunity to get people together to share our dreams, ideas, activities, and to consider how forming a network might make us all stronger. 22 women crammed into this tiny room in Wakefield. Where was it? The art?
It was the language school.
The language school. Eager to meet and to share. This was the formal birth of the Ottawa-Gatineau Grandmothers Regional Network, called the OGGRN for short. I always forget it. And some of the groups here today were in attendance at that meeting. We agreed on some principles of operation. Number one, set a focus on solidarity, both among ourselves and with our sisters in sub-Saharan Africa. Number two, celebrate the strength and contributions that older women make. Number three, build a movement, not a bureaucracy, with only as much organizational structure as was needed and helpful for us to work together. Number four, to be inclusive, inviting others to contribute their skills, passion, and time, and to appreciate the contributions of everyone. Number five, to work together to do three things. fundraising, awareness, education, and advocacy. Number 6, and this was important, to insist that the region was Ottawa-Gatineau and included groups from the Quebec side, and to do all we could to promote and enable the use of both English and French in the campaign and in our work. Number 7, to recognize that we are all volunteers, to share the load, and no guilt if we can't do it all. And perhaps most importantly, number 8, to have fun together. Those are the original principles of the creation of this region. And I believe that all of these values remain in the regional network today. See some heads nodding, good. Well, one woman piped up and said, you know, maybe we could have a newsletter. Mia, does that sound familiar? Right, said another one, and a regional calendar of events that we can share, and a speakers bureau, and a website, and a team of leaders who could go out and talk about the movement, recruit members, and help people form new groups. There was a lot of passionate talk about the need to make governments accountable for the rights and needs of women and children in the face of the HIV and AIDS pandemic. We'll come back to that. But I'd like to ask 2 people now, Ruth Salmon and Sue Cousineau, to just say a few words about the origins of your group. You can use that, Mike. Who wants to go first? Ruth?
It works, yeah, okay. Every group here has their origin story. You know, it might have been coffee with a friend or meeting someone. Our group came about in a very convoluted way about 19 or 20 years ago. I don't remember exactly when. The United Church in Wakefield had a little outreach, just one of their international things, and a movie was shown called Condoms, Fish, and Circus Tricks. And it was a movie by 2 local filmmakers, Brenda and Robert Rooney, and it was about a circus group going around Africa, handing out condoms basically and doing all these tricks. And it was the point of the gathering, which was in the school gym in Wakefield, was to have awareness of this AIDS thing that was happening in Africa. And there was a discussion afterwards, and one of our local doctors, Thomas Mindy, stood up and said, well, gee, you know, my mom and dad are in South Africa, and my mom's working with AIDS orphans. Would you be interested in hearing from her when she comes back? We all said, sure, that'd be great. So fast forward, I don't, 19 years ago, 18 years ago, it's hard to tell. It all seems the same these days, doesn't it? Nina Mindy, who I just want to acknowledge just passed away in the past couple of months. She was with the West Hill Grannies in Montreal, which has just folded as of last week, and she was a very important member of that group. Anyway, she comes to visit her son and brings Rose Latwaba in tow, and Rose Latwaba was a psychiatric social worker working on the Alex AIDS Orphans Project. And Nina had been volunteering with her while her husband was teaching at the university. And they noticed that a lot of these orphans who were coming to the project were being brought by their grandmothers. They looked out into the yard, there was a tree in the yard, and they looked out into the yard, and there'd be a grandmother here, and a grandmother there, another grandmother over there. No one was talking to each other. And they realized that these grandmothers didn't all even speak the same language, because they had come from a rural area to take care of these AIDS orphans. And some spoke Zulu, and some spoke Shona, and, various Pedi, whatever languages they were, and they had nothing in common, and they were all unified by a feeling of shame. And they didn't want to talk about why they were there and why they had brought their grandchildren there. So it was these 2 women, Rose Latwaba and Nina Mindy, who decided to start the first group of solidarity for these grandmothers, and brought the first group together at the East Bank Clinic in Alexandra Township. So Nina and Rosa Twaba came to Wakefield, and they spoke at the United Church, of course, and explained about this group and these grandmothers and how it was, really giving them a chance to realize that they weren't as alone as they felt they were to be. And they were warmly received by the community. The next day, Norma Geggy, who celebrated her 98th birthday 2 weeks ago, and who I saw 2 days ago, and she sends her regards, was in the general store in Wakefield, and she ran into Nina and Rose, and she walked up to them and she said, I have an idea. What if there were 12 women in the group in Alex at that point. She said, what if I got 12 women from Wakefield to write to your 12 women? And Rose said, that would be amazing. And that's how it started. It was never started as a fundraiser or a help thing. It was purely solidarity. And that's the origins of our group. Of course, as time has gone on, we now have 2 groups, a rural and an urban group, and we do fundraise, and most of our money goes to food security. So that's our origin story.
Great. Thank you, Ruth.
Our group started on a bike. We happened to be cycling in the Eastern Townships, I think, or I don't know, 2006. And it was at the same time, this was in September, when the International AIDS Conference was held in Toronto. And that was the conference where they brought in 100, the Stephen Lewis Foundation brought in 100 African grandmothers to this conference. I didn't know the Stephen Lewis Foundation even existed at that point, but we heard on CBC News on our cycling getaway, this is a group of about 15 women that every year go away for 3 or 4 days of cycling, said, that sounds interesting. What do we think about what our group would do? We've been cycling together for about 30 years by that time. We're good friends. Maybe there's another purpose we could add into this group. And many of us were new grandparents or wannabe grandparents. And the nods around the table, this is around happy hour at the end of the day, we said, yeah, sure, let's do this. It was as simple as that. And that was in September of 2006. It took us until the January, February period when we knew of the Wakefield Grannies, and we invited Brenda Rooney to come into my home, and we brought our WOW Women on Wheels group. And we sat around, and Brenda gave us some tips about how to form a granny group, what are your expectations, and right then and there, we chose our name as the Grassroots Grannies, and we decided that we would do a first fundraiser. And we were all semi-gardeners, I suppose you could call it. We were all interested in it. We thought, okay, the first one will be a garden sale, plant sale, and a garden tour. And that was in May of 2007 was our first event. And correct me here, Martha, you're our money lady. We raised maybe $6,000 for the foundation, $6,000 to $7,000 that year. And, yeah? Oh, well, it got better, but I always think we raised, yeah.
We'll forgive you. Go for it.
We thought it was really excellent, and that started then, and it was that point, that was in May of 2007, that was Mother's Day weekend. Grandparents' Day comes up in September, and by that time we had our meeting about this regional potential network being formed, and the first event of that was the Solidarity March on the Hill.
Yes.
And so that was in September on Grandparents' Day.
That's right. We're going to talk about that.
Okay, I will stop there. But we started with 15, roughly, WOW members. We morphed into the Grassroots Grannies, and now we're more than 25. I've lost count because 2 new members came in just this year. We raised, as Martha said, maybe a little less than 6,000, but collectively over our 16 years of existence, we're really proud to say that we've given to the foundation over $1 million, just our Granny group. Yeah, and it's interesting to note that while the genesis was in cycling and biking, of course, one of our events is the Ride to Turn the Tide, and many of you know about that. And that is the online fundraising event that really raises a lot of money. And this year, proudly, we raised over $90,000 for the foundation. So I'll stop it there. It started small. We're steady. We're growing slowly, but we're still really strong. And I think the efforts of our group is because we are friends. We have a strong bond with each other. And over time, as we all aged, we've all supported each other in different ways, and that's what keeps us going. And so I think that is, that the networking of the region is important, but working within our group is really what keeps us together, okay?
Great, thank you, Sue. I wish we had time today to hear from each of you and the various other groups that are there. We don't have time, but I am pleased to announce that we are going to do a little regional history project with Mia's support through the newsletter. So we'll be coming back to you, and some of you have already done this, but we'll be asking groups we'll give you a little template and asking groups to write your history so that we have it and we can share it. And it won't be just verbal, it'll be there and it'll be archived. So you'll be hearing from us on that one. The region after the original meeting, and there were already some other groups involved, grew very quickly. By 2008, there were 24 groups, and some of them were outside of Ottawa per se. And I know we have some people here from Petawawa today. Thank you for being here. Yeah. And the Lanark County Grannies from Perth, and there were a number from the rural area. So those are really important stories to capture. Let's ask Sandy now to fast forward us. We've been talking about the past. Where's the region at today?
You don't want me to consult my notes?
Yeah, come on up here.
I do have some notes here somewhere. So where are we as a region? As Peggy said, the region was created following the Toronto Gathering in 2007. And Lynn and I are now your GRLs, but I want to acknowledge that the first GRL for the region was Sue Cousineau, followed by Marjorie Court, and then Mia, and then Sheila Green and Pat Coughlin, then Barb Coyle and Diane Thompson, and Lynn and I have inherited that from Barb and Diane. In 2019, as Peggy said, there were 24 groups in the region. Today, we're down to 15 active groups, with one group, St. Joe's, on a temporary break. They assure us they're coming back. Last year, unfortunately, Ann Picora's group, Amas for Grandmas, decided they could no longer continue. Some of the members happily found homes with other granny groups. And recently, Wanda Murray's group, Riverside Grannies, decided officially to disband. And it's particularly sad because our last gathering, of course, was organized by the Riverside Grannies. COVID has certainly taken a toll on our members. The isolation, the technological challenges, the inability to inspire each other through personal interaction has affected us all. And that's why this gathering today is so important. The SLF has been through many changes as well and expanded its focus, and we heard that from Niambi today. Most recently, I've gotten my notes here, we lost Winnie. We didn't lose Winnie, but unfortunately, Winnie has decided to go on and do other things, and we valued her. She was a very valued member of the campaign staff, always cheerful, always willing to help, and always very supportive. But we've gained Alana, who has already shown us that she's eager and dedicated, and we look forward to getting to know Ruth Ann, who is now going to be our contact at the SLF staff. Today here, we have 16 GRLs in total across the country, representing 13 regions. One region is no longer represented, and I want to look into this when we're doing the history. Ontario East and North no longer has a GRL, and they include such groups as the Kingston Grandmothers Together, the Quinte Grandmothers for Africa, and Grandmothers by the Lake, all of which are very active groups. As GRLs, our role is ambassador, conduit, and liaison between the regional groups and the SLF. And it's been a wonderful experience to meet the other GRLs across the country, to hear about their challenges and achievements, and realize that together we truly are stronger. So Lynn and I have been challenged over the past couple of years to keep the region together and motivated through the constraints of COVID. But by the showing today, we're all still here, we're all still dedicated, and with the added complications of COVID, as we've heard from some of our speakers today, the grandmothers in Africa need us now more than ever.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Sandy and Lynn, for your wonderful work, for your persistence and pulling this together today. So let's go back to that original meeting in Wakefield where we started a region. There was a sea of hands when we asked for volunteers to help organize a march on Parliament Hill. It came together quickly. On September 9th, 2007, the Ottawa-Gatineau Regional Grandmothers Network staged an amazing march and rally on Parliament Hill. Participating guests included Mama Darlena and Madam Zodwa from South Africa, who the Stephen Lewis had brought over, which was wonderful to have them. Ilana Landsberg-Lewis from the SLF was there. We had grandmother groups from all across Eastern Ontario and Quebec. Representatives from some local Indigenous communities, and over 500 members of the public joined us in that march. Elizabeth Mataka, the new UN Special Envoy for AIDS, crossed the Atlantic to join us. I awoke in the middle of the night with this crazy idea to invite her. And one email exchange later, here she was. There was extensive media coverage of the event, and the Ottawa Call to Action was released. So I'd now like to ask Ruth, Sandy, and Sue to each read some key parts of that declaration now. Got it here for you. Get it out here. Okay. Reader 1, reader 2.
A call to action, September 8th, 2007. As grandmothers from Africa and Canada, we are drawn together by our deep love for our children and grandchildren, and by our profound concern about the havoc created by HIV and AIDS in Africa, particularly on its women and children. We believe that with support from our governments and international agencies, we can address this untenable situation.
We African grandmothers are strong, determined, resourceful, creative, and resilient. We have the wisdom that comes with age and experience. We demand to be heard. We do not need a great deal, but we do need enough. Enough money for food, housing, and school fees. We deserve income security, training and education, emotional and social support, affordable health care, and access to medications to treat HIV and AIDS. We urge our governments and the international community to recognize our situation and take action to address it now. We have buried our own children. We will not raise our grandchildren for the grave. Our grandchildren, like all children, deserve a future.
We Canadian grandmothers stand firm in our commitment to give of ourselves because we have so much to give. We urge our government to take action now to increase our foreign aid contributions, to give direct assistance to the African grandmothers who are caring for millions of vulnerable children, to provide political leadership and generous financial support to international programs, including the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and to increase support for non-governmental organizations working in international development and HIV/AIDS. We honor the African grandmothers as we honor our own parents and grandparents. We will not rest until they can rest.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Ruth. The ending.
To do nothing is to turn our backs on a global injustice. Millions of lives and the future generation of Africa are at stake. This is a call to action.
Wow. Pretty tough stuff, eh? And wonderful stuff. Before I close, I'd like to briefly reflect on the situation today, some 15 years after the creation of the regional network. Some of you may have tuned into the session at the UN on Monday. It was the International Day of Older Persons, or just this week. The title of the session was The Resilience of Older People in a Changing World, highlighting the contribution of older women. I'm wearing this t-shirt for a reason, okay? I got this at the UN many years ago, and of course it says, older women count. And it's a play on words, because obviously older women count, we count, our sisters in Africa count, in terms of the contributions that we make, families, communities, economics. But there's a double entendre, and that is the fact that in most cases, and it's still the way 15 years later, older women are not counted. They're not in the statistics. Therefore, they're invisible. Particularly in Africa, and I know that Rotum and some other groups have done some really good work at finding the older women in their communities and the grandmothers in their communities. But it's really unforgivable that in this modern world, we know so little about older women, especially in low-income and moderate-income countries. That has to change, and Canada has the technology and the expertise to help with that. At this session on Monday, it was really hopeful to hear about the resilience of older women, and we heard some of that from Kenneth too with his wonderful stories. The persistence and the courage that we so admire in our African sisters. But it was sobering as well to learn that not a lot has changed. All over the world, older women remain largely invisible and discriminated against in both policy and practice. And as we've heard today, this has been exacerbated by COVID. In Canada, we need only to look at what happened in long-term care to feel the pain and the anger. In Africa, our sisters have it worse. Their livelihoods, health, families, and communities are threatened by the triple jeopardy of 2 pandemics, climate change, and a global recession. The speaker from Africa at the UN webinar challenged the resilience framework, suggesting that it's time to stop expecting older women to just bounce back from neglect, poverty, and stigma. And it was time to change the systems and ageist and sexist traditions and systems that allow this to continue. The grandmothers movement has always been about solidarity and supporting each other. And as Sue said, my observation is that we grow older. As we grow older, we need this more than ever. Among us in Canada, among the grandmothers in Africa, and the community groups they work with, and between us, though we live an ocean away from each other. So I'd ask you now to stand and join me in a celebration of that solidarity, friendship, and fun, and the continuation of the grandmothers movement and this amazing regional network you have all worked so hard to build and maintain. So, Julia, can we have a little music?
This song says, no matter who you are, no matter where you go in your life, at some point you're gonna need somebody to stand by you. Oh yeah, oh my darling, stand by me. No matter who you are, no matter where you go in life, you gon' need somebody to stand by you. No matter how much money you got, all the friends you got, you gon' need somebody to stand by you. When the night has come and the land is dark and that moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't shed one tear. Just as long as your people come and stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Come on, stand by me. Yeah. Oh, when that sky that we look upon, well, she tumble and fall on the mountains, they should crumble into the sea. I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Please stand by me. Stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Please stand by me. Stand by me. Oh, baby, baby.
For that, Peggy, and I think we all needed to move around a bit after sitting for so long. That was truly inspiring, and I look forward to this international conference when maybe we can do a little singing and dancing with our African sisters. That would be wonderful. Just before we finish off this, Sheila reminded me a little earlier that our region is rather unique in that we have a special relationship with Stephen Lewis. Sheila, did you want to say just a little something?
Some of you know that it's very important that we have our GrannyFest here because Stephen Lewis started here in West Ottawa He was with the NDP, and he was a teacher, and so our go-go grannies, of course, really enjoy that history that he began here, and I've spoken to him when we had our Greater Van Gran in Vancouver and here, and it's just wonderful that he was able to get across and see so many of the granny groups.
Thank you so much. And now I think Lynn's in charge of the draw for those beautiful gift baskets. Oh, and the books, yes. Don't forget the books. Books are still available, $5 each, and they're available, in the fellowship hall next door. Okay, now the draw.
I think Hilda intends to leave the books here, do you not? She doesn't want to take them home. So if any of you think you can take them and sell them, let Hilda know how much you've sold them for or how many you've sold, and you can just give the money to the Stephen Lewis Foundation. Okay, I'm going to do the draw. Alana, do you want to draw the first? Everybody there. Okay, the first number is 7650124. I've got to check. It's okay. Okay, so Jean Caldwell is the recipient of the everything you need for a charcuterie. Okay, and the second one? Good, thank you, Alana. It's 7650140. And that was won by Sue Smart. Thank you to the ladies who helped us so much by selling the tickets. How much was it? $307 raised on those two baskets. So that will go to the Stephen Lewis Foundation. So first of all, I want to thank Sheila Green and Joan Turner on behalf of the Unitarian Go-Go's. They became our hosts for the day, so we didn't have to pay a fee for this venue. And we have given a donation to the Unitarian Church. And thank you again to the Unitarian Church, to Julie for her AV expertise. Julie, you were fantastic. And to the custodian who was here when Jane and I arrived at 7:30. We didn't know he'd be here that early, but it was great. Thank you to our presenters, all of them, especially to Alana and Nyambi for traveling here from their offices in Toronto to be with us. It's great to have members of the SLF working with us. To Kenneth and, of course, to Wanda for her wonderful work with 60 Million Girls, and, of course, to our own Peggy Edwards, because she always inspires us. Thank you, Peggy. We also need to thank all of our generous donors, Chartwell,
retirement homes donated to our lunch, which was provided by the mission. We like to use the mission because we feel we're sort of giving back to the community at the same time. And each and every one of you, oh, and also to Bridgehead Coffee, sorry. And to each and every one of you, thank you so much for attending the first O-Grand gathering in over 3 years. This is amazing. We also want to thank the ladies from Grandmothers Aiding Grandmothers who provided the muffins and breads and desserts today. And just a little bit of housekeeping. Please remember to fill in your evaluation forms. There's a basket on the registration table that you can put them in before you leave. And also, please drop your name tags onto the table and we'll be able to reuse them another year. They're not cheap and it's nice to save the money.
Just one little minor housekeeping thing. Somebody has lost a lovely small silver hoop earring. It's right here, so check your ears. And I would like to thank Lynn. We talked about a GrannyFest from day one, and it just never seemed right. And finally this summer we decided we would go for it. We had a little bit of a difference in the dates. I wanted to do it sooner rather than later. She wanted to put it off because she knew she was having a busy summer. So between me being at the cottage and Lynn working frantically, and Lynn being in Newfoundland with limited internet access, and me being home working frantically, it came together. And I don't know about you, but I've had a good day. So I want to thank Lynn for her patience with me, for her organizational skills, and for trying to answer my emails with intermittent access in the far reaches of Newfoundland. But yeah, Lynn has been a great person to share this job with, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
And to Sandy too, she worked so hard while I was in Newfoundland because she managed to get all the speakers. We'd done a little bit of work before I left, and we've just been going full out for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm going home and putting my feet up, and I'm going to have a glass of wine in my hand. Thanks so much. Oh, thank you all. Thanks everybody for your dedication, and Sandy and I we're really pleased that this has come about, and we just thank you for being able to see you in person. That makes such a difference. Okay, thank you.
Oh, everybody? Would everybody be interested in gathering together for one photo before we all go home? Can we come up here maybe? Would that be the best idea? Yeah, come and gather up here just for a second, and Alana's going to take a photo.
You gonna need somebody to stand by you when the night has come and the land is dark and that moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't shed one tear, just as long as your people come and stand by me. And darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Come on, stand by me. Yeah. Oh, when that sky that we look upon, well, she told me Thank you. Thank you.